Greetings! In today's video we'll be reviewing episode 4 from season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, Forget Me Not, written by Alan McElroy, Chris Silvestre and Anthony Marienville, and directed by Hanal Culpeper, who, as well as other Discovery episodes, also directed the premiere of Star Trek Picard. Now, if this is your first contact with us, welcome aboard. My name's Carl Bromley, and this is the Trekkie's Guide to the Galaxy. So, let's have a quick summary. Our episode opens with Dr. Culber performing an assessment of the crew with the overlay of his personal log, describing the recent potential trauma the crew has endured. Discovery jumps to Trill and receives a seemingly warm welcome, but after beaming down and the Trill learning that Adira is human, which they consider an abomination, they refuse to help, and Trill Commissioner Vass attempts to apprehend Adira so he can forcibly remove the symbiont. Burnham stuns them, and one of the Trill Guardians takes them to the caves of Makala in an attempt to help Adira. Meanwhile, on Discovery, Saru wants Stamets and Tilly to develop a new navigation interface for the Spore Drive, just in case Stamets happens to get himself incapacitated again. Culber informs Saru of his findings, that the crew are physically fit, but that their mental health needs addressing. And Saru consults the ship's computer about the best way to do this, during which the computer glitches with the sphere data for a moment. Saru hosts a dinner for his senior staff, which doesn't really have the desired effect, ending up with several of the officers at each other's throats. Back in the caves of Makala, Adira enters the symbiont's pool, and things don't go quite to plan there either, as she vanishes below the water. Burnham has to follow her, and after helping Adira connect with her symbiont, they return from the pool and convince the Trill that the joining of a symbiont and a human gives hope to the survival of the Trill race. The episode then closes with Adira now able to access Admiral Tal's memories and giving Discovery the location of Federation headquarters. And the crew in the shuttle bay are watching a classic black and white comedy movie and starting to come back together as a crew after realising their emotional trauma. So to me, this episode is very different to what we've seen so far this season. The first 3 episodes have dealt with Burnham and the crew finding each other and setting us up with what the future is like. And I've loved every minute of this new series so far. But like I said, this episode to me is very different. However, it's most certainly not bad different. To me, this is one of the few Discovery episodes that really focuses on character development. And not just one character, although the main story for this episode is about Adira and the Trill. The continuing side plot that addresses the other crew members and their emotional states is not only just as compelling to watch, but it's just as important. And the writers have managed to combine both stories for this episode under the same banner, and I think that's why the episode works so well. This is a really beautiful episode, and it deserves a far more comprehensive understanding of the subject it's addressing than I have. But for what it's worth, I'm going to give it a try and explain what I got from the episode. So, the underlying theme to this episode, in my opinion, is trauma. How different people deal with it, or how they hide from it. And how the only way to really move on is to face it, however difficult that may be. The opening scene sets the tone for this episode really well, and I thought that having Dr. Culber doing the log entry was a great choice. They could have easily stuck with Burnham doing the opener as usual, but it seems that the writers really have listened to the fans that have been asking for more from the rest of these characters. At the end of the day, he's the one who is not only able to get a true feel for the mood of the crew, but he's also the one who, as he puts it, has himself been through post-traumatic growth following his death and rebirth, causing him to evolve and live his life in a different way. This makes him the perfect choice to narrate what is happening with the crew, and to be able to interact with them on that personal level, with them all knowing what he has already had to endure. I love as well the way that he presents this information to Saru. He's professional, but also empathetic in his explanation that the crew, including our new captain, have to come to terms with what has happened to them both individually and as a crew. Indeed, throughout this episode, Culber manages to help several of the crew begin to realise what they need to deal with. His conversation with Burnham catches her off guard, where she assumes he's there to talk about her investigation of the burn. When he comments that she's been busy, what he's actually referring to is the change in her sleeping quarters. If you think back to when we've seen her quarters over the first couple of seasons, it's been sparse, structured, empty. Whereas now there are ornaments, plants, and patterned bed covers. This alone shows the transformation that the character of Burnham is undergoing, and it's Culber who notices and points this out. He realises that Michael is going through the journey of growth that he did, and he uses the current situation to help her realise it when he bluntly says she should be the one to help Adira, who has recently had everything she depended on stripped away, because Michael understands how that feels. He rightly points out to Michael that she is still in the process of dealing with all that has happened to her, but that Adira is only just starting out on the journey. And this moment of conversation helps Burnham open up to him. Just knowing that someone else does understand what you're feeling, and making that decision to open up, even just a little, to someone you can trust, can be like a huge weight lifted off your shoulders. And indeed, for a responsibility hoarder like Burnham, a good way to help yourself is to feel that you're the one helping someone else. Very well played, Dr. Culber. And also, shout out to Wilson Cruz, playing this new side to Culber that we're seeing brilliantly. I can't wait to see how this character continues to evolve. Maybe even into a ship's counsellor. Next, I want to look at Stamets, Tilly and Detner. So, Captain Saru visits the lab and says to Stamets that he wants to talk about his jumps. Stamets immediately goes on the defensive, saying he's fully recovered and fine to keep jumping, as if he's tired of hearing that line of conversation, most probably from his partner Dr. Culber and also Jet Reno, who is notably absent in this episode, which I think is a shame. I think she would have provided a little like comic relief in those tense moments of the episode. But then again, would that have been entirely inappropriate? I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that one. Drop them in the comments below. Anyway, Saru explains that what he actually wants is for Stamets and Tilly to start working on a new interface that doesn't require him to be the only person who can operate the spore drive. And Stamets' face says it all. As well as having already made this huge sacrifice coming to the future, having been impaled on a 7-inch spike and being placed in a coma, only to help save the ship whilst almost bleeding to death in a Jeffries tube, now he's being asked to find a way around the very thing that makes him unique and indispensable to the ship. Can't imagine that's a pleasant feeling. And to top it off, one of his closest colleagues has already begun to look into it. Now, okay, he then belittles Tilly in a way that is really unfair and extremely unprofessional. But you can kind of understand why he feels threatened. And he again comes under fire at the captain's dinner table, this time from Lieutenant Detner, who so far has managed to suppress her trauma. But now she's being pushed to join in with the haikus, and it's this push that tips her over the edge. A haiku, by the way, is a Japanese poem that's made up of 17 syllables arranged into lines of 5, 7 and 5. A furious outpouring of uncontrolled raw emotion directed at Stamets incites his retaliation, and in the argument that follows, we finally find out what it is that Detner has been bottling up. her feelings of responsibility as the pilot of Discovery, and the weight that she feels of the position, having everyone's life on board depend on her actions in a crisis. A battle, an emergency landing, flying them all 930 years into the future. All of those actions might have been ordered by somebody else, but it was her that pushed the button and made it happen. And now the magnitude of her position and the realization of the consequences of her actions are overwhelming her. In her mind, she's alone and isolated, as she believes no one else could possibly understand the way she's feeling and the weight of responsibility that rests on her shoulders. Stamets' retaliation is to throw at Depner everything he was feeling during his conversation with Saru in the lab, pointing out that he is the only one who can jump the ship, and that he was back at work in a matter of hours after his injury. None of these things are down to Depner, but the volleys of emotion fly back and forth between them, until, of all people, Tilly steps in. Now the thing is with Tilly, she's a little further into this whole journey of growth after opening up to Michael in episode 3. So she is very well placed to jump in and remind the two of them that they do not hold the monopoly on pain, explaining to them that all their experiences and their work is what matters, and the only way they can get through the situation they're in is to work together as a crew. Now, she still approaches it in a very Tilly way, but you know what? She's not wrong in what she's saying. She just needed to approach it in a slightly more mature fashion. And after cooling off, Stamets returns and reassures Tilly that everything he's accomplished on Discovery would have been impossible without her. Which, of course, she already knew. And it wasn't the fact that she needed Stamets to tell her this. It was the fact that he'd failed to ever do it, for which he apologises. Depner has also come to the realisation from the evening's dinner events that she is most definitely not okay, and she takes this opportunity to admit as much to Dr. Culber, which she states was a hard thing for her to say. It comes across that Depner has been trying to live up to the macho image of a pilot that she believes the crew has of her, and I think that's something that most of us have probably been guilty of at some time. Not necessarily the hard-ass image of a pilot, but certainly of trying to live up to other people's views and expectations of us. And you know what? You don't need that extra stress in your life. Nobody wants to disappoint people they care about, but at the end of the day, as long as you don't let yourself down, and if those people truly care about you, then you couldn't possibly disappoint them. And this shows in the shuttle bay when Depner and Stamets come face to face. With a simple understanding look and reassuring hug, they move past the argument, and they will be able to support each other the way friends do. Now, at the end of the dinner scene, as much as Saru probably feels he's made the situation worse, he has in fact done the crew a great service. In fact, that's all he's ever tried to do. From instructing Dr. Culber to assess the crew's health, to giving them all the night off and organising dinner at the captain's table. His hope was to help the crew, in particular the bridge officers, feel important and connected again. As Culber points out to him, Discovery could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice. Saru has always shown that he sees the emotional well-being of his crew as one of his most important priorities. He actively seeks to understand the mood of his crew and desperately wants to be able to help them. But as much as he will make a great captain, he is still learning his new role. And all this added pressure of knowing his crew are in a bad place, but not knowing how to deal with it, is the burden that he is carrying. In fact, he comments to Tilly after dinner that Captain Pike always made connecting with the crew look so easy, making it clear that he feels he struggles to make such connections with people. Saru will always look to help his crew before himself, which ironically, is the thing that will probably help him the most. It's very selfish of him, really, when you think about it. But Tilly reassures him. She tells him that the crew made the decision to follow Michael into the future together, and that they are now living with the consequences of that decision together. And that despite the dinner not going as he had planned, he should not feel despair, because he showed great leadership in reminding the crew of that point. He then takes more advice from the computer and shows a classic Buster Keaton slapstick comedy movie in the shuttle bay, which serves as a great distraction for the crew, lifting the mood and filling the room with joy. Saru seems to think that this act is what started to bring the crew back together, but Culber rightly points out to him that without his initial push forcing them to stop pretending they're okay, they would not be able to start this journey of growth together. Now, while we're on the subject of Saru and the computer, I know that when the computer glitched and showed a joining with the sphere data, the immediate thought that popped into my mind, along with probably everyone else's, was that this sounded like, and most probably is, the beginning of the AI Zora that we see controlling Discovery in the Season 1 short trek Calypso. But what I want to focus on is how Saru reacts to that glitch and how he sees what's happened. Now, most reviews that I've watched so far have reacted along the lines of, well, if that was my ship and the computer started talking to me like that, then I'd be a little more concerned. But that reaction's not overly Trek when you look at it. Think about it. When the computer first changes its tone and starts talking to Saru, it's not being threatening. It's trying to help him and the crew. And let's not forget, Saru knows that the sphere data is integrated into Discovery's systems much deeper than just being a database of knowledge. In the battle at the end of Season 2, it was controlling Discovery on its own to raise the ship's shields and defend itself from attack. But at the same time, it did let Discovery's crew back aboard in order to protect and preserve itself. One of Starfleet's primary missions is to seek out new life, and this, by definition, is that mission. So I think Saru is spot on with his assessment of the situation, and I think this shows that the makers of the show do get what Star Trek is about. Okay, now for the big one. Adira. With a complete memory loss up until 1 year prior, and with the weight of not only needing to know who she really is, along with knowing that she holds the key to Discovery being able to find Federation headquarters, she makes the decision for them to head to Trill and seek help. Adira is well aware of this expectation that rests on her, as is evident with her comments to Burnham when she explains that she doesn't want to let anyone down. The Trill initially appear grateful for the return of one of the symbionts, as they carry the history in their memories, and the sense of relief that Adira must have felt when she's welcomed with such reverence could only be matched by the gut-wrenching disappointment of then being referred to as an abomination and turned away. She then has to deal with the threat of having her symbiont forcibly removed. Poor kid doesn't know if she's coming or going at this point. Fortunately, one of the Trill Guardians is willing to go against the hierarchy, realising the importance of Adira's ability as a non-Trill to be joined with a symbiont in the preservation of the Trill race. Finally, she makes it to the caves of Makala, where she enters the symbiont pools to try and complete the connection with the Tal symbiont. And Guardian Z drops us the hint that Adira's inability to access Tal's memories could well be due to a repressed memory regarding the joining. And this gives us an insight as to what we're about to see. So let's head into the pool. Adira is afraid and unsure as to what she's supposed to be doing. Not surprising, really, considering she's surrounded by glowing strands that are trying to attach themselves to her. But after Burnham deduces that they are in fact the memory strands from the symbiont's former hosts, things start to happen. Despite her fear, Adira allows the strands to connect with her, overcoming the first obstacle. And we immediately see a very familiar scene when it comes to the Trill. Someone lying on a bed, ready to become the recipient of a symbiont. But it's not Admiral Senatal, as we would have expected. It's a young male Trill named Grey. And Adira begins to remember. We learn straight away that Grey was Adira's boyfriend, and we see that Adira is questioning if he'll be the same person after the joining. She already has some level of uncertainty and fear in her voice. Fear of losing the person that she loves, which is understandable as we also learn that she's an orphan. It's plain to see that Adira doesn't want to face this painful memory, but with some reassurance from Michael, she reconnects with the symbiont, and we see Grey playing the cello. It's the same as the music we've been hearing in the background of this whole scene, and kudos to the writers here. They've obviously done their research on previous Trek episodes that have dealt with Trill's former hosts, and once again chosen to go with music as the emotional link. Adira is once again questioning if the person in front of her is still the same person she loves. The fear of losing that which is most valuable to her is still at the forefront of her thoughts. Grey reassures her that he is still the same person, just more, and continues to explain that the joining of the symbiont and host is not so different to the joining of two people. You see, every loving relationship is built on trust, and that trust must be given willingly, without condition. The same is needed between the host and the symbiont for a joining to be successful. Adira is holding a box, and inside is a gift that she has made for Grey. But as Grey opens the box, Adira once again recoils away from the memory. And this is where the two stories of the episode tie together. Adira, as did the crew of the Discovery, has to make a choice to confront her trauma. It's the only way to move forward. Opening the box returns her to the memory and the moment that causes her so much pain. Inside is a quilt she has made for Grey, with patches on it depicting their story together. You see, despite her worries about his joining, her love for Grey and the knowledge that this is a special time for him means she wanted to mark the occasion with a very beautiful and very personal gift. Grey is mortally wounded by the impact, and in this moment, Adira's worst fears are materialising before her eyes, only not in the way that she feared. This scene is both heart-wrenching and beautiful, as Adira makes the decision to unconditionally save the Tal symbiont, knowing that the cost will be Grey's life. And as she does this, her connection to the symbiont is complete. And this is the payoff. All that fear, all that uncertainty, it's all put to rest as Tal's former hosts appear to her and Burnham, including Grey, allowing Adira to see all the parts that now make up her as a whole, and allowing her to be at peace with the loss of Grey, knowing that he lives on inside her. And as they emerge from the symbiont's pool, the confidence that Adira now radiates is clear, and her journey has now well and truly begun. So, now to our rating. Well, like I said, way back at the start of the video, this episode is very different to what we've seen so far this season, but certainly not in a bad way. Everything I've said about the previous episodes with regards to the quality of the production, the writing, the direction, the camera work, special effects, and again, The music, they haven't allowed any of these levels to slide one little bit. And as for our new addition, Blue Del Barrio absolutely nailed this episode. For a young actor in their first major role to be giving us this level of performance, with so much complexity to the character, it's a joy to watch. It's a very strong episode, again, both as a standalone and as part of the story arc. And the more times I watch it, the more powerful it gets as I look to understand the messages behind what's happening. The trill species and how they're used as a metaphor for all the different facets of our own personalities, and how we must accept those facets unconditionally if we're ever going to be at peace with who we truly are. The inner traumas that each of Discovery's crew are feeling and how they lash out at the people closest to them because of it, only to then realise that these are the very people that are there to help them face those inner fears and move on with their own journey. The overall message that once you're able to face your personal trauma, whatever that may be, well, then you can be just like that shuttle bay and allow yourself to be filled with joy. I'm going to give Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 4 a warp factor rating of 8.5. Well, thanks for watching this review, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please smash the like button. I always look forward to hearing your thoughts about these episodes, so please drop those down in the comments below. Don't forget, we'd love it if you'd consider subscribing to the channel and also hitting the bell for notifications so that you find out whenever we post any new content. And until next time, set a course for Discovery Season 3, Episode 5, Warp 8.5. Engage.